In March of this year, March is Women's History Month, and it's in honor of all women. And so I published a book called Brilliantly Brave, um, Women's Stories of Grit and Grace. And these were stories that I collected from many women I know. And in the last time I talked, Jill was kind enough and generous enough to read her story, which was in the chapter called Heartbreaking Courage. Um, so she's a real inspiration to me, as many of you are. So a couple months ago, I have a newsletter and it comes out quarterly, and it's primarily women. Over the years and the times I've talked or with my books, have signed up for this newsletter. And so what I did a couple months ago is I summarized the book into 5 brave acts. And that's what I'm going to talk about this morning. The 5 brave acts that these incredible women shared with me. So and the first three, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. And know that all these women that are in my newsletter are working women. Very few are retired. So um, that's why in one or two cases, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because most of us now have moved on from our jobs and uh, we're lucky enough to, have some leisure time now. So anyway, the first um, the first brave act is, and I'm going to read a little bit and talk a little bit. So just so you know of the flow here, the first brave act is find work that makes you come alive. And what I write here is I say, in a world that demands so much of us women, it shouldn't take courage to choose a happy life. Yet sometimes it seems very brave indeed. Being thoughtful about our work choices, leaving jobs that don't light us up, advocating for ourselves and new approaches to our jobs, these can be hard, but all worth doing for our well-being and fulfillment. And in this part of the book, there are several women who did just that, left jobs that didn't light them up, moved to other jobs, were really quite courageous in making those moves. So that's all I'm going to say about the first brave act. Second brave act is, and this is probably relevant for all of us, but especially for women, learn to say no. And here I say, how can you discern what's best for you if you don't stand up for what matters most to you? You'll just keep saying yes to everyone when you mean to say, I would rather not. Or more precisely, hell no. Paraphrasing Thomas Merton, when we are always divided and pulled in so many directions by conflicting plans and projects, we do violence to ourselves. And here I actually tell a story about a woman who I thought was a good friend. And, I was very, very busy at work at HGTV, and she would call and I'd, stop and we'd talk and chat. And I always did that. I mean, and then there were certain things that I invited her to. The tickets were hard to get. Anyway, I felt like I was a really good friend. So it took me a while to realize she wasn't. So in the beginning, kind of like the Hollywood honeymoon period of a friendship, everything was great. And then she started, every time she called, she'd ask about my boss. How's Ken? Is he happy? Is he still married? Is he coming to New York soon? That kind of. And I started realizing that I was a path to him for her. And that was, I felt very, it was fraudulent friendship, if you will, if there's such a thing. So I stopped taking her calls, but I did tell her. I said, I'm realizing that this really isn't the friendship that I wanted. I feel like I'm a path to him for you. So anyway, I stopped taking her calls, and that was hard, really hard, because it's hard for me to say no. But I did it, and I was pretty proud of that. And okay, so that's number two. Three, use this formula. There's a book that I liked quite a lot, Arthur Brooks' book, From Strength to Strength. And he has a formula in that book which defines happiness with this formula. What you have divided by what you want. So I wasn't a math major, but I know enough to do a little bit of division here. And basically, what he's saying is if what you want, the denominator, is greater than what you have, you will always be fractionalized, not whole, chasing the next thing, our ego. In our language, in this community, our left brain, on overdrive. And I wrote, when we come to know our true selves, which we do here in this community, which takes reflection and quiet time, we come to see that we don't want or need more. And there were several women who wrote about that, how they finally got to that place. Um, so those three. I'm just sort of offering in a abbreviated way, because I want to spend a little time on four and five. Four is know your hall. Hall is spelled Haal. And it's Persian for heart. And given um, our, our community is called Heart to Heart, um, I think the title of this talk, a good one, would be Hall to Hall. And I'm going to read the reason that I even came upon understanding and knowing that Hall is Persian for heart is because I came across a blog and I was looking at it yesterday and couldn't believe that the writer published it in 2014. It felt like it was just so current to me. And I'm going to read parts of it because I think it provides a lot of inspiration and also relatability to what we do here every Sunday. So the writer is a professor at Yale whose name is Omid Sefi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I'm just going to read a little bit. So he writes, oh, by the way, he published it on the On Being blog, which is the Krista Tippett blog. I think she's still doing that. This was 2014, but I think she's still doing it. So he writes, I saw a dear friend a few days ago. I stopped by to ask her how she was doing, how her family was. She looked up, voice lowered, and she whimpered, I'm so busy. I am so busy, having to do so much. Almost immediately after, I ran into another friend and asked him how he was. Again, same tone, same response. I'm just so busy. Got so much to do. And it's not just adults. When we moved to North Carolina about 10 years ago, we were thrilled to be moving to a city with a great school system. We found a diverse neighborhood filled with families. Everything felt good, felt right. After we settled in, we went to one of the friendly neighbors, asking if their daughter and our daughter could get together and play. The mother, a really lovely person, reached for her phone and pulled out the calendar function. She scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. She finally said, she has a 45-minute opening 2.5 weeks from now. The rest of the time, it's gymnastics, piano, and voice lessons. She's just so busy. How did we end up living like this? Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we do this to our children? When did we forget that we are human beings, not human doings? What happened to a world in which we can sit with the people we love so much and have slow conversations about the state of our heart and soul? Conversations that slowly unfold, conversations with pregnant pauses and silence that we are in no rush to fill. The disease of being busy, and let's call it what it is, the dis-ease of being busy, when we are never at ease, is spiritually destructive to our health and well-being. It saps our ability to be fully present with those we love the most in our families and keeps us from forming the kind of community that we all so desperately crave. One of my daily struggles is the avalanche of email. I often refer to it as my jihad against email. I'm constantly buried by hundreds and hundreds. And people expect a response right away. I too, it turns out, am very busy. The reality looks very different for others. For many, working two jobs in low-paying sectors is the only way to keep the family afloat. 20% of our children are living in poverty, and too many of our parents are working minimum wage jobs just to put a roof over their head and something resembling food on the table. We are so busy. It doesn't have to be that way. In Muslim cultures, when you ask others how they're doing, you ask in Persian, Hale Shoma Shetara. How is your hall? What is this hall that you inquire about? It is the transient state of one's heart. In reality, we ask, how is your heart doing at this very moment, at this breath? When I ask, how are you? That is really what I want to know. I am not asking how many items are on your to-do list, not asking how many items are in your inbox. I want to know how your heart is doing at this very moment. Tell me. Tell me your heart is joyous. Tell me your heart is aching. Tell me your heart is sad. Tell me your heart craves a human touch. Examine your own heart, explore your soul, and then tell me something about your heart and your soul. Put your hand on my arm. Look me in the eye and connect with me for 1 second. Tell me something about your heart and awaken my heart. Help me remember that I too am a full and complete human being, a human being who craves a human touch. I want to be, I want to have a kind of existence where we can pause, look each other in the eye, touch one another, and inquire together. How is the state of your heart today? Omid Safi. Beautiful, beautiful piece. Know your hall or your heart to heart. Number 5 is cherish yourself. Given we're all sort of emotionally exhausted by our politics of today, the anger, the rage, the divisiveness, the cruelty, cherishing ourselves is all the more important. And for women, this is particularly hard. We're always cherishing everyone else, but this is important for all of us today. So here I write about Greg Boyle, who's a special friend to me. And Jill and I were lucky enough to record a few of his talks when I wanted to interview him for something I was doing. And he goes by G for his friends. Greg Boyle, he's a Jesuit priest. Um, he's the founder of Homeboy Industries, which is the largest gang intervention program in the world. Last year, President Biden awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor for his work with kids that are in gangs. He's he would say, I've buried over 300. I would say, yes, but you've saved tens of thousands. Um, because every one of those burials just breaks his heart. So we were talking one day, and he said to me, "You are unshakably good. We all are." And then I say to him, "Well, we had a no hiring assholes rule at HGTV for a reason." And he said, "Our essence is goodness, even when we go off the rails. There are plenty of narcissists in the world, which is a mental illness." He, by the way, would describe Donald Trump as a sociopathic narcissist, but he would also say these are mental illnesses. Um, then there are those who can't see their goodness, can't live from their goodness because they can't see it, but it is always there. So one day, another day, I was talking to him and I asked him to tell me the story of Gonzo. I've met several of his homies in Los Angeles, but I'd never met Gonzo, and the story was in one of his books. Um, and so he said, okay. So Gonzo was at a baptismal party, and he walked outside to the front of the house, and a car drove by and opened fire and leveled him. And so they rushed him to the hospital. He struggled several days, and they finally stabilized him, but they had to take his leg. So G knew he had to keep it light when he went to see him the first time because he knew he'd break down if he didn't. And Gonzo wanted to keep it light too, so he walked in and Gonzo said, "Gee, I'm never going to dance anymore." And G said, "Dog, you never could dance." And then he broke down and cried. He said he got so overwhelmed looking at him, he just broke down and cried. And Gonzo said quietly, "Gee, I'm not my leg." And so I love that story. And and what G said to me after that is, which is radically true. We are not our leg or our brain or our job title. In Debbie Mahoney's case, we are not our cancer. We are in no way incomplete, he said. There's nothing missing. And so I concluded the book this way by saying, when we cherish ourselves, a truth dawns. There's nothing missing. Okay, thank you. Now we enter the part where we sit quietly in meditation for 20 minutes.